Just by accidentally looking at the man in front of her, this girl could immediately foresee his death. Seeing her daughter so panicked, the mother immediately guessed that she had seen the future again, as the girl explained that 3 months ago, she dreamed that on a snowy night, the man would light his lighter to smoke and suddenly explode. When the mother heard her daughter's dream, she was certain that something big was about to happen, because up until now, everything her daughter Hongju dreamed of had come true. Hongju and her mother rushed out to the parking lot to stop the man. However, he appeared annoyed and did not believe what the two of them were saying. The man angrily pushed them to the ground and then drove away. Hongju helplessly watched the car's headlights gradually fade into the distance. Even though her mother had been quick enough to snatch the man's lighter, Hongju understood that it was useless and her dream would definitely come true. If the man wanted to live, he had to listen to Hongju. But no one believed her absurd words. Even her father had died in vain because he did not trust his daughter. Hongju knew the truth beforehand, but could not prevent it. So eventually, what she dreamed of still happened, and the man died in the explosion. When Hongju returned home, she fell into a deep sleep. In her dream, Hongju saw herself waking up in a hospital, and she knew that her mother had died in an accident. Hongju woke up in agony. Chaotic emotions made her lose her composure, and Hongju's eyes had become swollen before she knew it. Everything she saw in her dreams was recorded meticulously and carefully. After Hongju left the room, the news reported a catastrophic accident that had just occurred. Everything happened exactly as it did in her dream. The victim was the man in the black shirt. Because he smoked at a gas station, he caused a massive explosion and was burned to death. Hongju was terrified when she learned of this, because everything she dreamed of became reality. Hongju felt like she was going crazy. She grabbed a pair of scissors and cut off her long hair. Even though her mother tried to stop her, Hongju feared that her mother's fate would be the same as that man's. They all met the most tragic ends. After Hongju calmed down, she told her mother everything, but she only comforted her daughter, saying that she would not die that easily. Hongju's mother even complimented that the short hair suited her daughter very well, and a new day began. Today, a new neighbor moved in across from Hongju's house. They were a pair of very handsome brothers. Contrary to her mother's excitement, Hongju appeared very worried, because she recognized Jae Chan as the boy she had hugged in her dream not long ago. To prevent this unlucky fate, Hongju decided not to get to know the new neighbor. She intended to drive him away with her coldness. After Hongju's plan initially succeeded, she was happily waiting for the bus, but she saw Jae Chan approaching her. He even sat right next to Hongju. Although Hongju moved her seat, Jae Chan kept following her. Hongju thought that he was following her because he wanted to flirt with her. She confidently stood up and declared that she had no interest in Jae Chan, but Hongju did not know that he did so only to make room for the students standing nearby. Because Hongju felt so embarrassed, she quickly ran onto the bus. After the bus left, Jae Chan realized that the voice belonged to the rude neighbor who had rejected his kindness. Today was the first day Jae Chan became a prosecutor. Because Jae Chan was so overjoyed, he took a selfie in front of the office. He did not know that his colleagues were judging him. When Jae Chan heard Bogum's voice, he finally noticed his surroundings. The two used to be teacher and student, but now they had become colleagues. The relationship between them did not seem very good. Jae Chan felt very uncomfortable seeing his old teacher appear here. He recalled an incident from 13 years ago, when Bogum used to be Jae Chan's tutor. However, Jae Chan's academic performance had been increasingly declining. To get the bonus money from Jae Chan's father, Bogum came up with a bold proposal. That was to create a fake report card to trick Jae Chan's father into giving them the bonus. At that time, Jae Chan was at the bottom of the class. Every time he went up a rank, he would receive 10,000 won. Although Jae Chan did not agree at first, when Bogum offered to split half the bonus money, Jae Chan could not resist. It was that decision that changed his life forever. After the fake report card scheme succeeded, Jae Chan had enough money to buy his favorite motorcycle. If things had remained peaceful, no one would have discovered it. But one day, Bogum drove the motorcycle and caused an accident. In a panic, he shifted all the blame onto Jae Chan. Moreover, Bogum threatened that if Jae Chan did not accept the blame, Bogum would fabricate evidence that Jae Chan was the one driving the motorcycle. Facing Bogum's terrifying threat, although Jae Chan was angry, he could do nothing. Jae Chan was arrested by the police, taken to the station, and met his father. He angrily asked Jae Chan where he got the money to buy the motorcycle. Although he insisted that he earned the money himself, Jae Chan's father did not believe him at all. He assumed his son had stolen the money. In a moment of anger, Jae Chan accidentally revealed that the report card was fake. This made Jae Chan's father very disappointed, and Jae Chan blamed himself for treating his father that way. After many years, Jae Chan had become a prosecutor, a dream for many. This time, he was determined not to repeat the mistakes of the past. That evening, while Jae Chan was taking pictures by his newly purchased car, he encountered Bogum. What was more surprising was that the person he was dating was Hongju. After Hongju exchanged a few words with Jae Chan, she and her boyfriend went into the restaurant. Although this was a date, Hongju had no mind for it. She was constantly worried because she could not reach her mother. Before leaving, Hongju remembered turning off all electrical devices in the house. Even the candles had been blown out, but Hongju had forgotten to close the main door properly. After remembering this, Hongju hurriedly abandoned the date and ran home. At the same time, a stranger followed Hongju's mother. Due to heavy snow, Hongju could not catch a taxi. Seeing this, Bogum wanted to show his girlfriend that he could drive in such bad weather conditions. Finally, Hongju's mother called her daughter back. It turned out she had forgotten her phone at the shop and had to go back to get it. Hongju was finally able to sigh in relief upon hearing the news. To prevent any misfortune, Hongju curiously asked her boyfriend if he could protect her mother. Although Although Bo-gum did not fully understand the meaning of the question, he agreed immediately. However, due to a moment of distraction while driving, Bo-gum caused a horrific accident. After Hongju was cared for at the hospital, she finally woke up. The first person she called for was her mother. Hongju was shocked to learn she had been in a coma for over 10 months, and her mother had died of a stroke because she had tried to earn money for her daughter's medical treatment and damages for the victim's family. Hongju's mother had to sell the house and work extra jobs from morning until night. She always hoped that one day her daughter would wake up. Regrettably, Hongju woke up too late. When Hongju read the will her mother left behind, she was heartbroken and could not accept this cruel reality. Everything was just like what she had dreamed. After Hongju calmed down, she was surprised to learn that she had become the perpetrator of the traffic accident. Hongju had to reclaim justice for herself by any means. Therefore, she requested the prosecution to cooperate in the investigation. However, all evidence was against her, as Bo-gum had deliberately given false testimony to escape punishment. He had moved Hongju from the passenger seat to the driver's seat to stage the scene. Because of this, all the evidence the police had incriminated Hongju. They assumed she was the driver. Hongju could do nothing else. She could only be helpless before her adversity. Because Hongju was in so much pain with this life, she intended to go to the rooftop and jump down to end everything. Although Jae-chan tried to dissuade her, he could not save Hongju. Jae-chan screamed in despair and suddenly woke up. It turned out to be just a dream of his, but Jae-chan found this dream very strange. It made him feel tormented. Coincidentally, today was the day all the tragedies in the dream were set to happen. To verify everything, Jae-chan decided to go to the restaurant where the two had a date. And the truth was exactly as he had dreamed. Bo-gum and Hongju appeared there. Although Jae-chan tried hard to pull Bo-gum away, he could do nothing. He could only wait in his car to prevent the accident. Snow began to fall. This made Jae-chan believe even more that his dream was real. Everything happened exactly as he had seen. It was Bo-gum who was driving the car that caused the accident. Jae-chan could only drive and follow the two of them. To prevent the accident from happening, Jae-chan risked crashing his own car into Hongju's car to make it stop. Jae-chan slowly approached, then opened the car door to Hongju's astonishment. Gu-ta, who witnessed this scene, was also amazed, because he was supposed to have become the victim of the collision just now. After Jae-chan confirmed that everything was fine, he was satisfied with the result he brought about. Although Bo-gum appeared extremely angry, Jae-chan told everyone about his entire dream. And of course, Bo-gum would never believe such an absurd story. Only Hongju recognized the similarities in their dreams. If no one in the world believed Jae-chan, she was ready to be the only one to place her full trust in him. Hongju slowly approached Jae-chan, then gave him a warm hug in the freezing winter. Just the words, "I believe you," truly moved Jae-chan. After the police arrived at the accident scene, Jae-chan and Hongju were quickly taken to the hospital. While the two were in the ambulance, Jae-chan told her the story of his dream. He thought Hongju would not believe what he said, but she thought differently. She herself had also dreamed such strange dreams. But this time, Jae-chan had actually changed it. At that moment, Hongju revealed another shocking piece of information. The accident that Jae-chan had just prevented would be transferred to someone else. Whether for better or worse, things would start to change from now on. Since Hongju was saved by Jae-chan, she became increasingly fond of him. Every morning when she woke up, Hongju went to the places Jae-chan had passed through in the dream. She always hoped to meet him. Hongju prepared everything to make Jae-chan most comfortable on his way to work. After much arranging, the two finally met on the subway. But contrary to Hongju's excitement, Jae-chan appeared depressed. He did not want to believe what he saw in his dreams. Because whenever Jae-chan saw someone suffer misfortune in his dream, he wanted to help. If Jae-chan could not help them, he would ceaselessly blame himself. Hongju also could not bear this cruel reality. Therefore, Jae-chan wanted her to forget about this, but Hongju did not agree. After so many years, finally, someone could change her dreams. Jae-chan was the special person Hongju had been searching for all this time. To pursue Jae-chan legitimately, Hongju coldly broke up with Bo-gum. At the international piano performance, a case of domestic violence was discovered. The police immediately arrested the husband to investigate. The daughter, So-eun, was extremely angry because her mother had been beaten to unconsciousness. So-eun now only wanted revenge for her mother. Fortunately, a friend discovered her in time before she did something foolish. So-eun felt helpless knowing her father would never be brought to court because the prosecution was incompetent and the lawyer was very cunning. Bo-gum always twisted the story to benefit his client. He would figure out a way to turn the charge of causing injury into simple assault. Although So-eun's mother was brutally beaten in the elevator and suffered 6 broken ribs, a specific detail, Bo-gum would easily change the charge. Only when the victim wanted the perpetrator punished would he be considered a criminal. So-eun knew well that her mother feared her father more than the law, so she could only obediently follow her husband's demands. But So-eun still wanted to free her mother. Meanwhile, at the prosecutor's office, Jae-chan was trying to resolve the domestic violence case, but he always faced obstruction from Bo-gum, who pressured Jae-chan to close the case. The two confronted each other fiercely without giving in. To win, Jae-chan decided to stay and work overtime. He wanted to resolve all the pending cases in the office. Seeing him so enthusiastic, his colleagues thought he was drunk. After a long day of work, Jae-chan fell asleep on his desk. In his dream, he saw his younger brother being taken away by the police, and he could only stand and watch, unable to do anything. Jae-chan worriedly called to check on his brother's situation. Only when he learned that Sung-won was safely at school could he sigh in relief. Although Jae-chan was half skeptical, his dreams had never been wrong. To verify everything, Jae-chan had to go to Hongju's house to ask for clarity. When Hongju saw his worried face, she sensed Jae-chan's discomfort as he continuously encountered omens about the future. Jae-chan had no other choice now. He was forced to beg for Hongju's help. She also appeared in his dream. Jae-chan didn't want someone to be arrested because of his negligence. When Hongju heard the name, she suddenly realized that was the murderer who had appeared in her dream. Someone had even said that he became a murderer because of his older brother. In the dream, Hongju had seen a couple arguing. The husband had violent tendencies toward his wife. Just then, their daughter and Sungwon appeared. Just because he wanted to stop So-eun's father, he accidentally pushed him off the balcony. Jae-chan realized this was the case he was handling. The bad premonition grew stronger. The two quickly went to the apartment where the incident occurred. At the same time, Sungwon was stopping So-eun from buying poison. When Sungwon learned that the stupid prosecutor was his older brother, he was completely disappointed. No matter how many times Jae-chan called, Sungwon wouldn't answer. To stop Sungwon from doing something foolish, Jae-chan and Hongju had to be one step ahead. Jae-chan stood in front of the elevator to stop his brother, while Hongju went to press the fire alarm to attract the attention of everyone in the apartment building. At the same time, she called the police to the scene. It was this false alarm that changed the worst future about to happen. Sungwon did not get entangled in the law. After seeing his brother's fierce attitude, Jae-chan changed his mind. By all means, he had to bring this abusive husband to court. Unexpectedly, the police officer who appeared at the scene was Gu-tak. Since that night, he had the ability to dream strange dreams like the two of them. When Gu-tak saw the girl from the accident, he curiously stopped to ask. Then he took everyone home. To prevent So-eun's father from continuing the abuse, Hongju invited So-eun and her mother to stay at her house. After Jae-chan returned to his room, he recalled memories of his father. Although Jae-chan's father was a strict man, he always loved and protected his son. Dad only wanted Jae-chan to have a better life, so he always forced his son to study hard. Dad was Jae-chan's strongest spiritual support. But once when Jae-chan's father went shopping, he heroically sacrificed himself while trying to apprehend an armed deserter. His father's courage gave Jae-chan more strength. Thanks to that, he could face any difficulty. The next morning, on his way to work, Jae-chan met Hongju waiting for him. Because she wanted to compensate for the damage to the car, she revealed the lottery results. Although Jae-chan pretended not to care, after leaving, he kept reciting the numbers to memorize them. Perhaps because Jae-chan knew the lottery results beforehand, he confidently talked back to his superior. Although the boss told Jae-chan to end the case, he did not agree. All the evidence he collected pointed to So-eun's father being an abuser. The superior angrily kicked Jae-chan out. The news of him arguing with the boss spread throughout the company. Most people admired Jae-chan's confidence, but a few others felt sorry for him, thinking Jae-chan was about to be fired. While Jae-chan was busy thinking about the case, he suddenly met the person he had saved. Because Gu-tak wanted to thank him, he came all the way there to invite Jae-chan to dinner. Coincidentally, the restaurant they chose was Hongju's barbecue restaurant. When Jae-chan saw the two laughing and talking intimately, he felt a bit jealous. But here, Jae-chan discovered something very surprising. His younger brother was working part-time there. It turned out Sungwon was trying to impress So-eun, so he came to work. It seemed today's meal was not as simple as Jae-chan thought. Gu-tak also had the ability to dream of future events. Just because Gu-tak wanted to verify his new ability, he changed reality by refusing to eat with his senior. Instead, Gu-tak decided to invite Jae-chan. Up to this point, everything was like the dream, from the customer's seating position to the food displayed. If everything was right according to Gu-tak's dream, then in 5 seconds, a special guest would appear. Just then, the door suddenly opened. Bogum walked into the shop to everyone's amazement. He knew where So-eun and her mother were staying, so he came to meet them. Jae-chan was also very surprised to see him appear here. Only Gu-tak remained calm, watching the small changes he created. A pressure-filled atmosphere filled the restaurant. Bogum came to find So-eun and her mother to pressure them. He threatened that if So-eun's mother wanted a divorce, the husband would not share any assets with them. That meant So-eun's dream of studying abroad would completely vanish. She would lose her talent and her future. Because So-eun's mother loved her daughter very much, she couldn't watch her daughter's future be ruined in her hands. Bogum's words truly swayed So-eun's mother. Everything was happening exactly as Gu-tak dreamed. He began to fear that the horrific event would occur. In Gu-tak's dream, So-eun would use chopsticks to ruin her own hand. When things were about to go too far, Jae-chan suddenly slammed the table in anger to attract attention. He had listened to the story from beginning to end, and from a prosecutor's perspective, he thought this case was not abuse but causing injury. No matter how So-eun's mother cried and begged, Jae-chan would prosecute So-eun's father to the end. Jae-chan had read the apology letters he wrote, but he felt they hadn't changed anything. Jae-chan firmly declared that he would give So-eun's father the heaviest sentence. Then, Jae-chan turned to comfort So-eun and her mother. He advised them to stay calm and trust him. His sincerity touched So-eun's heart. Finally, she put down the chopstick. Gu-tak, witnessing everything from behind, smiled with satisfaction. The small detail he changed prevented that terrible moment. After everything ended, Jae-chan began to wonder why Gu-tak brought him there. He certainly had a purpose. Gu-tak happily said he would only answer if Jae-chan treated him to another meal. Jae-chan had to treat Gu-tak to snacks at a convenience store, but Gu-tak seemed dissatisfied with this meal. Jae-chan asked straight what he was wondering. Actually, Gu-tak himself couldn't believe that what he dreamed became reality. Jae-chan was surprised to learn he also dreamed of the future. Not only Gu-tak, but Jae-chan and Hongju could all dream a type of dream. The reason Jae-chan could save Gu-tak was because he foresaw the future. Gu-tak began to feel suspicious. Was this an infectious disease? The three began to think of a series of reasons for this coincidence, from licking yogurt off the lid to blood types, but none were correct. The only logical thing to affirm was that they started dreaming these dreams after being saved. Looking Looking at it positively, this dream could be considered a blessing because they could prevent bad events from happening in the future. After Jae-chan parted ways with everyone, he returned to the office, even though it was dark. He decided to research all files related to the case carefully. Early the next morning, colleagues were surprised to see Jae-chan still hadn't gone home. He even dragged his senior to take statements at the scene. Another long day passed. On the familiar bus, Hongju was waiting for Jae-chan. After a series of tiring workdays, he fell asleep on her shoulder without knowing. The affection between the two increased. Now, only he was in her mind. Hongju witnessed Jae-chan trying hard every day, which made her very satisfied. Today was the last day of investigation to close the domestic violence case. Therefore, Jae-chan showed more determination than ever. In the interrogation room, he confidently stated his strong arguments, accompanied by a threatening attitude and gestures forcing the other party to admit guilt. But it was all just a rehearsal for the final interrogation. Jae-chan could not suspect that behind the glass, his colleagues were watching him act. However, his enthusiasm changed everyone's perspective. Witnesses related to the case were summoned. During the tension, Gu-tak suddenly called Jae-chan. He wanted Jae-chan not to interrogate the abusive husband, but to hand this over to his senior. In Hongju's dream, the husband would be released as innocent if Jae-chan interrogated him. Although there was no precise proof, in Gu-tak's dream, the husband would be arrested by the investigator in charge. Both dreams had the same progression, but they differed in results. After hearing this, Jae-chan felt very hesitant because the investigator in charge had a close relationship with Bo-gum. Jae-chan feared all his efforts would become useless, but currently, he had no other choice. Jae-chan could only rely on his senior. This was a big gamble he accepted to risk. Seeing the interrogator change to Choi-sung, Bo-gum revealed a smug smile. A moment later, the interrogation began. Everything was exactly as the other two had said. So-eun's father advocated not admitting guilt, despite the witnesses present. Bo-gum also edited the story to benefit his client. Just because So-eun's mother wanted 100 million won, she staged the abuse scene. Bo-gum also recorded the conversation at the restaurant. This was evidence very beneficial to So-eun's father. After seeing the evidence Bo-gum presented, Choi-sung began to tend to agree with his fabricated story. This made all witnesses uncomfortable. Jae-chan was very worried at this moment. He couldn't sit still seeing that bastard about to escape punishment. Jae-chan was about to intervene when suddenly Choi-sung changed his attitude. He asked about the witness testimony. Right after So-eun's mother fainted, what did her husband say? Everyone answered that. He said, "I didn't do it." This was the key point, clarifying the case. If So-eun's father was a man who loved his wife and children as he claimed, the first thing he would do upon seeing his wife faint would be to run to check on her, not stand there justifying that he didn't beat her. It was this sentence that convicted So-eun's father. Jae-chan only then realized this unusual point. He confidently approached to charge So-eun's father with abuse. All evidence was exposed. Even the tape recording the scene when So-eun's mother fainted was announced. Jae-chan threatened that if So-eun's father continued to lie, then later, those very lies would be used against him in court. Although Bo-gum wanted to stop the interrogation, the situation was unsalvageable. Because So-eun's father was too scared, he confessed everything he had done. Finally, So-eun convicted him exactly as happened in the dream. The case was successfully resolved. In recent days, Hongju always had to face a nightmare. In her delirium, she saw herself lying unconscious in the middle of a forest. After waking up, she still felt like she was dreaming. That feeling terrified her. Fortunately, every morning her mother's voice woke her up from the nightmare. Her mother was the source of motivation helping Hongju try harder. Every early morning, Hongju went to the familiar cafe to wait for Jae-chan. When Jae-chan saw her expectant look, he could no longer hide. He curiously asked about Hongju's job and why she always had time to follow him like that. Actually, Hongju didn't know if she could continue her job as a reporter or not. Although Hongju really wanted to work, she was afraid her dream would become reality. At the same time, when Hongju's mother was cleaning her daughter's room, she saw the application letter to return to work. Hongju's mother was very disappointed that her daughter wanted to return to being a reporter. It wasn't that she didn't agree, but she feared her daughter would be in danger. Although at first, Hongju decided to quit and not work anymore. After meeting Jae-chan, she thought differently. He had the ability to change the future, which gave Hongju hope. But no matter how Hongju persuaded her mother, she did not agree. To her mother, Hongju was a fragile girl who always made others worry, so she wanted to protect her even more. Hongju also felt the love her mother had for her. Just then, two police officers suddenly walked in. It turned out to be Gu-tak and his senior. Because Gu-tak wanted to meet Hongju, he accepted spending money to eat barbecue. Gu-tak cleaned the table while sharing his thoughts. The fact that three people dreamed strange dreams was not normal. It must surely have a rule. If Gu-tak found out how it operated, he could prevent bad things from happening in the future. Suddenly, Hongju curiously asked what would happen if Gu-tak dreamed of himself sacrificing. Gu-tak unhesitatingly answered that he would change that vision. This answer satisfied her very much, but only Hongju's mother was dissatisfied. She shouted and chased the two policemen out. After Gu-tak and his senior left, Jae-chan's group also appeared. People came here just out of curiosity. They wanted to know what kind of person Hongju was and why Jae-chan was so fascinated by her. Before everyone ate, they held hands to pray together. However, the group disagreed on a case. One side agreed to punish heavily the person who gave the car keys to a drunk driver, but the other side thought he was not guilty. Only Jae-chan had not agreed with any side. Both sides had their own reasons, so Jae-chan needed to think carefully. To find a way to rescue him, Hongju appeared and brought beer. According to her, everyone's prayer before eating went against the view of religious freedom. The fact that all four people were Christians was impossible because only 20% of the Korean population followed Christianity. Therefore, the probability of four people following following the same religion was very low, even lower than seeing a double rainbow. That proved someone here was lying about their religion. Therefore, the fact that Jae-chan was not afraid to show he did not follow the religion was brave. He was not cowardly at all, as people said. Hongju's answer made everyone admire her. After Jae-chan's group returned to the company, the boss realized she was the famous reporter Hongju. She had stood up to denounce the violations of high-ranking officials. The only thing was, no one knew why she quit her job. That evening, after Hongju came home from work, she encountered the fried chicken shop owner feeding cats. Just because the owner worried about the cats, he cut down the customers' food portions. Hongju intended to approach and talk to him, but because she was too tired, she walked away. When Jae-chan returned home, a dream appeared in her mind. At the candle-lighting confession event at the university, a serious fire would occur, and the victim was the female cafe employee. To prevent this tragedy, Hongju hugged the fire extinguisher in the shop and rushed out to save people. Before the fire could catch the gas, Hongju quickly sprayed the extinguisher to stop the fire. However, the students misunderstood that she was ruining the fun, so they angrily chased Hongju. Jae-chan had also dreamed a similar dream, so he went to check. Fortunately, he arrived in time to save her before things got worse. His appearance gave her more confidence to return to the profession. After Hongju's mother witnessed her daughter being so determined, she wavered a bit. Therefore, Hongju's mother went to talk to Jae-chan. She wanted him to protect her daughter in her place, because only Jae-chan could change Hongju's future. Hongju's mother allowed her daughter to return to being a reporter. This made Hongju very happy. Today was the first day she returned to work. Hongju was very worried standing in front of the company door. While she was still hesitating, Jae-chan appeared, took her hand, and walked to the company together. This action gave Hongju more confidence upon her return. But when Hongju saw the new uniform, that terrifying dream haunted her once again. But thanks to Jae-chan, Hongju no longer had to fight alone. Contrary to Hongju's luck in finding someone to trust, the female university student she saved the other day received bad news. Se-ron's third brother passed away in a traffic accident. What was more reprehensible was that the person driving was her eldest brother. Although the prosecution wanted to perform an autopsy to confirm the cause of death, the eldest brother wanted his brother to depart intact. Because the victim's family did not agree to the autopsy, the prosecution could not do anything else. After Se-ron's third brother was cremated, her eldest brother fled with a huge insurance payout. When the prosecution noticed something suspicious, they immediately issued a warrant for the eldest brother, Se-hun. Se-hun quickly withdrew all the insurance money, then went to meet lawyer Bo-gum to ask for help. At first, Se-hun acted as if he was wrongly accused. He even put on a miserable face when being blamed. But Bo-gum was no stranger to scumbags like him. After Bo-gum investigated the story thoroughly, he knew clearly that Se-hun was the one who killed his brother to appropriate the insurance money. Although Bo-gum did not want to help this scumbag, he was blinded by money. As long as Bo-gum helped Se-hun escape punishment, this large sum of money would belong to him. In Jae-chan's dream, he saw himself dating Hongju. The two watched a news report she produced together. It was about the murder for insurance money that the prosecution was investigating. Today was Hongju's official first day of work after a long break. To help her feel more secure, Jae-chan decided to hold her hand and walk her to the broadcasting station. Choosing a topic for this report was very important, so Hongju constantly tried to go everywhere to gather more news. The first destination she chose was the patrol station where Gu-tak worked. The two talked continuously upon meeting, so Hongju still hadn't finalized a topic. Just then, her superior called her. While Hongju didn't know how to answer, Gu-tak offered her a case. Recently, the number of stray cats being killed for insurance money had increased significantly. This was a series of killings as the cats were poisoned with cyanide. Although Hongju didn't want to report on animals, her superior thought this was a shocking case. Therefore, Hongju was forced to investigate the case under her superior's orders. Meanwhile, at the prosecutor's office, everyone was discussing the murder for insurance money. Jae-chan suddenly remembered his dream from last night. He worriedly asked if the suspect's surname was Kang. The other prosecutors were surprised that he knew this information. Everything was exactly as Jae-chan had dreamed, but there was one difference. The victim in this case was Se-ron's brother. This proved that Se-ron was also in danger. It seemed like an easy case, but the suspect's lawyer was Bo-gum, which made everyone concerned. Although all evidence was against Se-hun, Jae-chan had a bad feeling about this trial. He was afraid to think of the bad scenario where Se-hun would escape punishment and be released. Confronting Bo-gum this time was prosecutor Shin-jae. When the trial just started, she presented a lot of evidence accusing Se-hun. First was the contract for more than 31 types of insurance. Every month, Se-hun had to pay more than 4 million won. From there, he fabricated a traffic accident to murder his brother with the aim of enjoying the huge insurance money. Furthermore, Se-hun falsified reports with 7 insurance companies, claiming it was just an accidental crash. With all the evidence above, Shin-jae thought she had cornered Se-hun, but Bo-gum was not easy to deal with. On behalf of his client, he confidently denied all allegations and affirmed his innocence. Since the judge could not find a common voice between the two sides, the preliminary trial temporarily ended. In his dream, Jae-chan saw Hongju being chased by a murderer. Because Jae-chan was very worried about his girlfriend, he asked her out to tell her about the dream. Jae-chan asked if Hongju had reported on any cases recently. When he learned she was only reporting on cats, he felt a bit more reassured. But to ensure Hongju's safety, she had to promise Jae-chan one thing. If she encountered danger that he foresaw in his dream, she had to tell Jae-chan the time and location so he could recognize it. Only then could Jae-chan protect Hongju's safety. The next day, the trial continued. Everyone from the prosecutor's office was present to watch the results. Shin-jae presented the search results from Se-hun's phone. On the day his brother died, Se-hun had used his phone to search for specific content. Through the searched keywords, one could discover his criminal motive and route. If the victim's body was autopsied, Se-hun's criminal behavior would be discovered, so he found a way to avoid the autopsy and quickly cremated his brother's body. At the same time, Se-hun also researched how to receive death insurance benefits, and finally, he took his brother's life in exchange for 2.7 billion won in insurance money. However, Bo-gum turned the evidence above into a completely different story. He argued that because Se-hun wanted his brother's body to remain intact, he found a way to avoid the autopsy. Due to economic issues preventing a prolonged funeral, Se-hun found a place for cremation. As for the insurance money, it was the final gift Se-hun's brother left for the family. Shin-jae felt she couldn't convict Se-hun yet, so she released the dashcam footage that had been edited. She suspected it had been tampered with to hide a crime, but Bo-gum didn't think so. He pointed out that Se-hun and the victim were biological brothers. If Se-hun wanted to delete the footage, he just needed to destroy the black box. In the recording, everyone could see that the voices of the two people were different. Therefore, this could not be considered evidence to convict Se-hun. From the very first day they met, Se-hun had confessed to Bo-gum that his brother didn't die from an accident but was poisoned by him. This was the final move for Bo-gum to turn the tide. He produced evidence proving that the victim did not die from the car accident, but from cardiac arrest. Based on the testimony of the rescue workers, what Bo-gum said was completely reasonable, because the amount of blood and the victim's body temperature were not like those of someone who died in an accident. Because the prosecutor had prosecuted Se-hun for causing a fatal accident, even if the reliability of the evidence was 99%, if there was just 1% chance the victim died of a heart attack, Se-hun was completely innocent. With Bo-gum's sharp arguments, the judge was forced to declare him innocent in front of everyone. But Jae-chan couldn't accept this decision, so he focused on reinvestigating the case. Today was the day Hongju met with danger in the dream. Jae-chan worriedly called to check on her. Only after confirming she was still fine could he calmly continue the investigation. In Jae-chan's dream, Se-hun was arrested for using poison to kill his brother. Choi-sung panicked when he discovered something unusual. It turned out that when the prosecution received the body, Choi-sung saw the blood color had turned from red to green. That was a sign of poisoning. At the same time, Se-ron was at the shop waiting for her brother to return. She was present at the trial, so after hearing the recording, she realized that it was entirely the eldest brother's voice, not her third brother's voice. Coincidentally, Gu-tak and Hongju were also there investigating the cat poisoning case. Gu-tak felt the situation was unstable, so he went into the shop to check first, but he was unexpectedly stabbed by Se-hun and collapsed on the spot. When Hongju saw her friend in danger, she rushed in to hit Se-hun and quickly pulled Se-ron to run first. He continued to chase the two girls to the rooftop. In the most critical moment, Jae-chan appeared in time. He was like an angel coming to save Hongju. The two men rushed at each other like wild beasts. With his strength, Jae-chan easily knocked down the opponent, but due to a moment of carelessness, he was cornered. Se-hun angrily hit Jae-chan's face repeatedly. That was all he could do at that moment. While Jae-chan was fighting Se-hun, the police arrived in time to support. After Se-hun was escorted to the police station, Jae-chan rushed to his girlfriend to reassure her. The next morning, Gu-tak woke up after surgery. Although his body was still in pain, he was more worried about Hongju's safety. Everything turned out well. Jae-chan returned to the office amidst the admiration of his colleagues. He was the one with the greatest credit in arresting Se-hun. Therefore, his superior trusted him with full authority to handle the case. On the way to the interrogation room, Jae-chan met lawyer Bo-gum. Jae-chan curiously wondered why Bo-gum didn't continue defending his client. Although Se-hun would pay a huge sum, Bo-gum had a rule he always followed. He didn't participate in bets he couldn't win. Before Bo-gum left, he asked Jae-chan to pass a message to Se-hun that no matter what he did, he wouldn't be able to escape punishment. Se-hun went crazy knowing he had been abandoned. He refused to cooperate without his lawyer. The news reported on Se-hun's case nationwide. Based on previous indictments and his unrepentant attitude, Se-hun was sentenced to life imprisonment. After the incident where Gu-tak was seriously injured, Hongju constantly blamed herself. Just because she wanted to find out who was behind the cat poisoning, she dragged Gu-tak to the shop to check with her. If not for Hongju's selfish action, Gu-tak wouldn't have been severely injured. Although Hongju didn't want to show it outwardly, Jae-chan could dream of her crying alone in the park. So, he brought tissues and waited for her. Not only did Hongju feel guilty, but Jae-chan also felt self-reproach because he had asked Gu-tak to follow and protect her. But thanks to that, Hongju was safe and sound. Perhaps Gu-tak also felt lucky that everything turned out well. When Jae-chan witnessed Hongju sobbing, he remembered his old self. When Jae-chan faked the report card and disappointed his father, a colleague of his father came to comfort him. That person said it was something that couldn't be changed, but Jae-chan could slowly fix it from now on, and eventually, his father wouldn't be disappointed in him anymore. This time, it was Jae-chan's turn to comfort the crying girl beside him. He would become a support for her whenever she felt weak. Today was the day Gu-tak was discharged from the hospital. To recover better, Gu-tak proposed staying at Hongju's house for a few days. This surprised Jae-chan. To repay Gu-tak for saving her life, Hongju quickly agreed. Jae-chan was helpless and couldn't stop it. That evening, when Sungwon returned home, he thought the place had just been burgled because the whole room was wrecked by the dog Gu-tak asked to keep. At this moment, Jae-chan could only watch Hongju happily eating grilled meat. Moreover, Gu-tak called to tell Jae-chan to go buy some leaves to eat with the meat. Although Jae-chan was very annoyed, he still had to follow Gu-tak's orders. Not only Jae-chan, but even Hongju was asked by Gu-tak to buy some personal items. Gu-tak even called to supervise the two with great amusement. excitement. Finally, the two finished buying a pile of things and returned home. Although Jae-chan offered to help carry Hongju's things, she refused because she didn't want to be indebted to anyone. This sentence made Jae-chan feel very uncomfortable. He asked if he could be an exception for her. Hearing the question, Hongju felt shy. Her heart rate increased every second, and her whole body heated up. Jae-chan intended to kiss her, but was stopped by the seatbelt. To escape such an embarrassing situation, Jae-chan deliberately brought up their past to make Hongju forget about the moment in the car. But suddenly, Hongju gave Jae-chan a kiss. Jae-chan stood motionless right in front of the door. Even Hongju couldn't believe she could do such a crazy thing. When Jae-chan was happily returning home, he received an envelope full of money. It turned out to be from his father's colleague. The armed deserter who shot and killed Jae-chan's father was that man's younger brother. To compensate the victim of his brother, the colleague sent compensation money to Jae-chan every year, although he didn't want to accept it. The next morning, Jae-chan happily waited in front of Hongju's house for her to go to work. Contrary to his excitement, she had a gloomy and shy face because she had kissed Jae-chan last night. Although the two walked together, Hongju kept trying to stay away from him. Jae-chan had to pull her closer. Hongju still pretended not to remember anything about last night. Even though Jae-chan kept mentioning it, their feelings continued to progress well. After many days of Gutak staying at Hongju's house, he decided to return home today. At the same time, the whole country was shaken by the murder of a female athlete. In his dream, Gutak saw himself being investigated and interrogated by prosecutors. He startled awake when he heard the phone ring. Hongju panic-strickenly announced that she had just dreamed of the killer breaking into Gutak's house, so she reminded him to lock the door carefully before sleeping. However, it was too late. Currently, Gutak was sitting next to the most wanted man in the nation. Actually, the two used to be high school classmates. This time, Do-young came here to beg for help from his friend. If Gutak didn't help him be declared innocent, he threatened to reveal a shocking secret of Gutak to the police. Gutak seemed to have anticipated this day would come, so he had prepared a resignation letter. Gutak coldly told his friend to turn himself in, while he would voluntarily resign. Do-young went crazy at his friend's heartlessness. He lay on the ground crying in despair. Because Hongju was very worried about Gutak, she went to his house to check. At this time, the police also appeared to escort Do-young away. Hongju was surprised to see Gutak cry for the first time. Although she had many questions to ask him right then, she had to hold back. The next morning, when Jae-chan looked out the window, he saw his crush walking with another guy. Jae-chan hurriedly ran down to intervene before the two gave each other a hug like in the dream. Gutak also perceptively realized Jae-chan's feelings, so he actively stayed away from Hongju. Since the three had important matters to discuss, they had breakfast together. At that moment, the TV was reporting that Do-young had turned himself in, but he constantly claimed innocence. Gutak was heartbroken seeing his friends suffer like that. He had known Do-young for quite a long time, so Gutak could be sure that Do-young was not a murderer. Suddenly, Jae-chan asked how he could be so sure. If everyone understood the human heart, life wouldn't need prosecutors or courts. Gutak couldn't be sure of anything until the investigation was conducted. All evidence was unfavorable for Do-young because he was the only person present in the security video on the day of the crime, and the fact that he hid from the police was also very suspicious. In Hongju's dream, she saw Gutak say that he believed the killer because the two were friends, not because Gutak thought his friend was truly innocent. Because Do-young was a murder suspect, his mother's shop received fierce criticism. Since Gutak didn't want Do-young's mother to be in danger, he advised her to close the shop for a while. But Do-young's mother always believed her son was a good person, just wrongly accused. As for the victim's family, they were willing to do anything to make Do-young live his whole life in prison. Bo-gum was hired by the family to protect the victim's rights. Bo-gum spared no tricks. He tried every way to make the media hostile towards the suspect. He provided Hongju with the suspect's resume. Do-young's father had a criminal record for drug use. Moreover, he was once arrested for assault and theft in college. Bo-gum did not hesitate to insult him. This was a lucrative piece of bait for the press because the case was the center of attention. As long as public opinion rose, the inspector would handle this case instead of the prosecutor. The decision now lay with Hongju. Would she publish this news for the benefit of the editorial office, or would she place her trust in Jae-chan? On the way back, Hongju recalled her painful past. Because her father wanted to save everyone, he risked his life to stop a deserter and died. After Hongju's father's funeral ended, she and a friend followed the killer's brother's car to a river. Because the man wanted to atone for his brother's mistake, he intended to drown himself in the river to pay with his life. But two boys jumped down to save him. Today was the day Gutak went to the prosecutor's office to testify for his friend. Before Gutak entered the interrogation room, he wanted to meet his friend one last time. Do-young began to worry as he still hadn't been released. He begged his friend to find the real killer before things went too far. Now, Gutak was Do-young's last hope. Before Jae-chan started interrogating the witness, he invited his seniors to observe. Since this was an important case, Chief Kim also paid close attention to this event. When Jae-chan just entered the interrogation room, he radiated a confident aura that made the seniors admire him. According to internal sources, Gutak graduated from the police academy with honors and was personally awarded a Medal of Honor by the Prime Minister. He was a tough opponent for Jae-chan in this interrogation. After the two greeted each other in a friendly manner, they quickly began the interrogation. Jae-chan asked about Gutak's thoughts after hearing his friend was wanted. Gutak confessed that from the beginning, he also misunderstood his friend as the killer because only Do-young appeared in the security video on the day of the crime. The prosecutors continued to raise their suspicions when strange bloodstains appeared in the victim's house. Surely, the killer used a tool to create them, then wiped all traces traces, but Gutak still confidently defended his view. He argued that the prosecutor's duty was to find that tool, not sit here and cast doubts, because all doubts could not become evidence in court. The seniors observing outside were also very surprised because Gutak's arguments had no loopholes. Even Jae-chan felt completely overwhelmed by him. He asked if Gutak advised Do-young to turn himself in, but Gutak's answer surprised everyone. Instead of advising his friend to surrender, he said if Do-young was the killer, he should run away. If Do-young were truly the killer, he would have asked Gutak to help him escape, but Do-young asked him to prove his innocence. Furthermore, Do-young had no motive to murder the victim, who would sort garbage when asked if they were angry. The prosecutors also began to view this case differently. This was the reason Jae-chan invited them. He wanted to persuade everyone. Because the prosecutor didn't have enough evidence to prove Do-young guilty, he was released. After a long, tiring day of work, Jae-chan really wanted to meet the person he liked. He shared all his arguments with her, from the short crime time, making it impossible for the killer to wipe all traces, to the unreasonable bloodstains drawn on the floor. If concluding Do-young was the killer, all those things were truly unconvincing. While Jae-chan was telling the story about the case, he confessed to Hongju, surprising her. In her dream, Hongju had also seen Jae-chan buying a wedding ring, but he didn't know her finger size. Therefore, this time, Jae-chan decided to reveal it beforehand so he could easily prepare the ring. The fact that Do-young was declared innocent caused public outrage. The press claimed he was released because the prosecution investigated poorly and didn't fulfill their responsibilities. Bo-gum was also very angry when he couldn't prosecute the case. Therefore, he decided to hold a press conference to announce the sideline details of the investigation. Do-young's past crimes were also brought up by him. With his talent for fabrication, Bo-gum easily steered public opinion to the scenario that Do-young would continue to commit crimes in the future. This meant there would be more victims, and the prosecution would have to be responsible for that. Gutak couldn't let things go too far. He explained to everyone about his friend's past crimes. Although Do-young made very small mistakes back then, he was criminalized. Things didn't stop there. Even information about Jae-chan was posted online by the press. People thought he accepted bribes, so he released the only suspect in the case. Those involved were suffering unreasonable outrage directed at them. Lines of protesters gathered in front of the prosecutor's office. They wanted to pressure the prosecution to reinvestigate the case. Jae-chan had to disguise himself to sneak into his office. Jae-chan becoming a topic of public opinion caused his family to face much judgment. Even Sung-won was isolated and badmouthed by friends at school. But things didn't stop there. A friend in Sung-won's class was teased excessively just because his father was in prison. The friend got angry and rushed to beat those who teased him. Sung-won had to work very hard to stop this chaos. In her dream, Hongju saw a stranger beating Jae-chan down. Because Hongju was worried about his safety, she told Gutak to find a way to deal with it. The perpetrator was a man about 1.8 meters tall, dressed entirely in black. Hongju's description matched Do-young, from the way he dressed to his physique. Gutak clearly felt the rage in his friend's eyes when he was cursed by the whole world as a murderer. To protect Jae-chan better, Hongju sat reading every comment about the case. The negative comments directed at him were increasing, making Hongju feel very uncomfortable. But among them, one comment opened up the secret of the case. An anonymous user discovered that the bloodstains looked like the tracks of a robot vacuum cleaner. It perfectly matched the blood drawing at the scene. On the other side, after Jae-chan interrogated the maid, he also guessed the truth about the bloodstains. Important information about the victim's health was revealed. She frequently fainted. All the pieces were linked together. The victim fainted and hit her head on the table edge. That blow severely injured her neck and led to blood loss. Afterward, the robot vacuum drew the blood tracks along its movement path. What everyone needed to do now was find the robot. Then, their deduction would be proven. The waste was collected at the scrapyard, so Jae-chan and his colleagues had to work overtime to search this place. The two had no other choice now. They were ready to start working. Just then, Jae-chan heard a familiar noise. It turned out Hongju's group had arrived earlier to search for the robot. Jae-chan emotionally hugged her as a thank you. From the pile of trash, a voice rang out, making everyone look up. It turned out Hongju's senior had found the robot vacuum. Now, everyone was just waiting for the blood test results on it, and then the case would be closed. The results showed the victim's blood on the robot. Everyone was happy to hear this news. This was the decisive evidence to close the case. However, things were not that simple. The editorial office forced employees to write articles unfavorable to the prosecution. At the same time, Choi Sung advised Jae-chan to prosecute the case to avoid bad public opinion from society. He recalled memories from his childhood when he saved the man. Although he was the killer's brother, he was forgiven by the victim's family. Before Hongju left, she didn't forget to leave Jae-chan a message that outrage is easy to turn into difficult action. Saving people is natural, but Hongju was truly too angry. Fortunately, Jae-chan stopped her. She could have regretted her decision to ignore others for the rest of her life. Now, Jae-chan had no hesitation left. He decided to free the innocent person, disregarding the consequences that might happen to him. On the editorial side, Hongju also persuaded her superior to let her do a report. The main character in this story was Do-young. When he was interviewed by Hongju, he couldn't hold back his emotions. Do-young tearfully affirmed his innocence. His sincerity made the public sympathize. Thanks to this report, Jae-chan discovered that the girl who left the message for him was Hongju. Jae-chan happily went to the jewelry store to buy a ring to confess to her. But to ensure Jae-chan's safety, Hongju asked Gutak to check where Do-young was. When Hongju received the message announcing that Do-young was drinking with Gutak, she could sigh in relief. Then she went to the meeting place to see Jae-chan. But suddenly, a loud gunshot rang out, surprising everyone. Jae-chan was critically injured injured. When Hongju saw him collapse on the street, she fearfully ran to him. Hongju screamed continuously in pain, telling everyone to call an ambulance before it was too late. Unexpectedly, the shooter was the father of the female athlete. Just because Namu was provoked by Bo-gum, he dealt with those involved in his daughter's death. After Namu shot Jae-chan, he intended to run over Gutak and Do-young. Fortunately, the police arrived in time to stop him. Otherwise, the two could have lost their lives. Jae-chan's condition was very critical. He was losing too much blood. In his coma, Jae-chan always wanted to apologize for not recognizing Hongju sooner. When the two met again, he shouldn't have said words that hurt her. If Jae-chan couldn't wake up this time, he was very worried. Hongju would always blame herself for not saving him. After everyone heard the news that Jae-chan was shot, they quickly ran to the hospital. Everyone was very worried as the surgery dragged on. Up to this moment, Hongju's hands were still trembling with fear. Jae-chan had fallen right in her arms. The future she tried to change had gone in a bad direction. Hongju cried bitterly in her mother's arms. Only when Gutak ran to announce the surgery was successful did she stop crying. Jae-chan had defeated the Grim Reaper. He woke up after the long surgery. Jae-chan was still groggy. He even mistook his boss for Hongju. Meanwhile, at Hongju's house, her mother gave her the item Jae-chan bought for her. When Hongju opened the ring box, she was very surprised to see a piece of paper in it. This was the paper she left for her childhood friend. It turned out Jae-chan was the friend Hongju used to know. He was the one who went through the most painful days of life with her. The family of the victim had let go of their resentment and apologized to Jae-chan. Suddenly, Jae-chan recalled everything in the past. Just because he wanted to meet Hongju, he defied the rain and ignored his dangerous wound to run out to find her. Fortunately, the dream warned her of this beforehand. Therefore, Hongju returned to the hospital to find Jae-chan. Hongju actually also remembered the events of 13 years ago, but because she was too scared, she wanted to forget the moment of hesitation when saving the person. Hongju had deliberately forgotten everything. Therefore, this time, Jae-chan wanted to meet her to thank her for everything. Hongju said nothing. She used a kiss to express all the emotions suppressed for so long. From the past to the present, Jae-chan was always the brightest light she never forgot. On the way driving home, Bo-gum suddenly received a call from a strange number. Although it was past office hours, when Bo-gum saw the caller's name was the famous writer Moon, he immediately turned his car back to his office. Bo-gum did not understand why the writer representing the nation wanted to meet him late at night. The writer revealed he was writing a new novel about a murderer. That person was a writer and also a professor. With many years of experience as a lawyer, Bo-gum immediately realized that the protagonist was the person sitting right there. It all started at the new book launch, when the writer's teaching assistant spoke up to accuse the writer of oppressing and exploiting students. But before Han Q could finish his sentence, he was dragged out by bodyguards. The writer was very angry at being betrayed by his assistant, so he murdered Han Q. But that incident was witnessed by a young child. Han Q suffered a severe head injury leading to a coma. In medical terms, it was brain death. Bo-gum had handled many similar cases, so he quickly adjusted the story to make it reasonable. The protagonist of the story was not a murderer, because Han Q got drunk at the party, so he accidentally fell down the elevator shaft. The Korean constitution did not recognize brain death as death, except in cases where the heart stopped beating. The writer was very happy to hear that. Because the writer had a habit of ordering others around, he ordered Bo-gum to make him a cup of coffee. This made Bo-gum feel annoyed. He began to get uncomfortable with the writer's words and attitude. Bo-gum reminded him that the writer needed him to defend him. The writer was now a criminal, so he should understand his position. His life was now decided by Bo-gum. Coincidentally, at the writer's book launch, Hongju was also there to work. After seeing Han Q stand up to expose the bad things the writer had done, she sensed that the writer used grades to oppress the assistants. Hongju intended to interview Han Q when this book launch ended. However, an unfortunate accident occurred. The next day was the day Jae-chan was discharged from the hospital. To facilitate the care of his wound, Hongju suggested that Jae-chan live at her house for a few days. Although someone tried to stop it, Hongju still dragged Jae-chan into the house. But it seemed Hongju's mother was annoyed by Jae-chan's appearance. He was taken care of very thoughtfully by Hongju. From bandaging the wound to measuring temperature, she did it very proficiently. These were all experiences gained after she cared for Gutak. Jae-chan was unhappy hearing her say that. Every time Jae-chan lay down, he imagined the scene of those two being intimate. This made him blush with jealousy. Because of Jae-chan's presence in the house, Hongju took care to look better, even when sleeping. She asked her mother if she had seen the wedding ring box she left on the dressing table, but she denied it and said she didn't know. Moreover, when Hongju mentioned her relationship with Jae-chan, her mother appeared very annoyed. Early the next morning, Gutak drove to Hongju's house for breakfast. When he saw her appear with a depressed face, he realized she also dreamed a strange dream like him. In the dream, Gutak saw Jae-chan lose the lawsuit and have to resign. Therefore, the two didn't know how to talk to him. At this time, due to curiosity, Jae-chan overheard part of the story about himself. To prevent the bad future that might happen to Jae-chan, Hongju decided to take him to run away from work. The two dated at a farm full of barley flowers. By this time, Jae-chan could not hide his curiosity. He asked Hongju straight about the events in the dream. Hongju was forced to tell him the truth. Tomorrow when Jae-chan went to work, he would have to make a difficult choice. A patient was brain dead due to a head injury in an accident. But when Jae-chan investigated, he discovered that the injury was not due to an accident, but the victim was harmed by someone else. Therefore, Jae-chan decided to perform an autopsy and caught the killer. However, the brain-dead patient had signed an application to donate organs to 7 other people. If the forensic doctor performed an autopsy, the victim could not donate organs. Then, the fate of the 7 patients case would come to an end. It was that shock that caused him to resign. But if the autopsy did not take place, the killer would escape punishment. Jae-chan would also feel guilty and quit his job. Either choice would bring a bad end to him. Therefore, Jae-chan decided to run away to the sea with Hongju. That evening, when the two returned home together, Jae-chan was pulled back by his brother. His luggage and belongings had been returned by Hongju's mother since morning. Although Hongju was annoyed by her mother's strange action, she didn't ask much. Although Hongju's mother felt guilty towards Jae-chan for doing so, she couldn't let her daughter suffer again. The next morning, the two went to the beach together as promised. However, Jae-chan wore office clothes. Hongju seemed to understand her boyfriend's desire to work, so she encouraged him to solve the case well. At the same time, the writer had found the person who witnessed him killing. Fortunately, Gutak subdued him in time and took him to the police station. Immediately after, he called to inform Jae-chan that he had found an important witness. The most crucial factor of the case had been found. Jae-chan immediately organized a meeting with his superiors. He wanted to discuss the decision to perform an autopsy. This meant 7 patients would not receive organ transplants. Jae-chan did not know that his senior also had a small child waiting for a kidney transplant. This was the last hope for her family. 2 opposing opinions were raised. If Jae-chan's judgment was wrong, the 7 patients waiting for transplants would lose their chance to live. Although Son-hyun was heartbroken by this news, as a mother, she still decided to support Jae-chan's judgment. The autopsy was necessary, but every choice came with great risks. Therefore, Jae-chan decided to perform both the autopsy and organ donation simultaneously. In the history of cases, only 2 had done both. The victims in similar cases were injured in the brain, not in the internal organs. According to the autopsy results, bruising was found on the neck. There were no signs of internal organ damage. The forensic doctor could examine the neck and brain to find the cause of death. After Chief Kim saw the feasibility of this plan, he approved Jae-chan's proposal. Although he had just spoken confidently, Jae-chan now hid in a corner and blamed himself. He didn't know what to do if his judgment was wrong. To comfort Jae-chan, Hongju went to his workplace to encourage him. In her dream, she saw that he had successfully caught the killer. At the same time, the 7 patients needing transplants were also saved. Although this was just a lie, it helped Jae-chan become much more confident. The transplant surgery was also performed today. The grieving father cried bitterly beside his son's remains, but at the same time, he was proud that his son's life had saved many others. At this time in the meeting room, everyone was advising Jae-chan to change the indictment from murder to intentional injury, because it was very difficult for Jae-chan to prove murder in court. If there was any mistake, the killer could be declared innocent. However, Jae-chan completely disagreed. All evidence of the case pointed to murder. No matter how difficult, Jae-chan was determined to pursue this case to the end. Today was the preliminary trial. Representing the prosecution, Jae-chan presented many images. They captured scenes of Han-kyu being exploited by the writer. He even assaulted other assistants just because the writer was dissatisfied with their attitude. At the book launch, Han-kyu stood up to denounce all the writer's criminal acts, but he was immediately stopped. Right after that, the writer called Han-kyu out and assaulted him. However, Bo-gum did not agree with this. The writer claimed that the assault was a legitimate self-defense reaction. Because Han-kyu was too drunk, he couldn't control his emotions. After the writer left, Han-kyu angrily kicked the elevator door very loudly. This caused him to fall into the elevator shaft himself. With all the above, Bo-gum firmly denied the murder charge put forward by the prosecution. The trial was gradually reaching a stalemate because the defendant refused to admit fault. The important evidence presented by the prosecution was rejected by Bo-gum. Currently, Jae-chan had only one final weapon left. That was the testimony of a person who was only 5 years old. But this was the person present at the scene. The problem now was how to communicate with Min-ho to get the testimony. Gutak suggested to Jae-chan that he use the voice of a 5-year-old to make friends with Min-ho. Only when the boy felt comfortable and safe would he recount what he had seen. After Jae-chan returned to the room to get his phone, he accidentally overheard a conversation between Hongju and her mother. She didn't want her daughter to continue seeing Jae-chan, because every time Hongju's mother saw Jae-chan, she remembered her husband. Hongju's mother understood clearly that her father's death and her boyfriend's injury both made her blame herself. Although Hongju understood her mother's feelings, she still hoped her mother could sympathize and like Jae-chan like her. Jae-chan was moved hearing the sincere words she said, and that was the greatest encouragement for him. It would empower Jae-chan in the upcoming trial. Today was the day Min-ho testified. Bo-gum deliberately asked confusing questions, making Min-ho's testimony unreliable. If his qualification as a witness was invalidated, the writer would be declared acquitted. Jae-chan could not let that scenario happen. He did not hesitate to transform into Santa Claus's friend. Jae-chan slowly made Min-ho feel more comfortable. Then the boy just shared what he had seen. What Min-ho recounted was very reasonable. It all matched the words in the recording that the prosecution collected. Everyone was furious at the writer's inhumane behavior. This was the strongest attack Jae-chan had prepared. Victory was leaning towards the prosecution. There was only one final trial left before the verdict was given. Because Son-hyun wanted to repay the organ donor, she offered to help. With her many years of legal experience, Son-hyun asked difficult questions to the forensic doctor. They struck directly at the strategy Bo-gum outlined. All his plans were ruined. It seemed victory was certainly belonging to the prosecutor's office, but Bo-gum pushed the responsibility onto the forensic doctors. According to criminal law, brain death was completely not considered death. Only when the heart stopped beating could it be concluded that the person was dead. However, the person who made the victim's heart stop was not the defendant, but the doctors. Because they performed organ donation, they allowed the victim's heart to stop. Therefore, from a legal aspect, the defendant could not be sentenced for murder. This was a big loophole in the current legal system. The victim's family was furious hearing Bo Gum argue like that. Fortunately, Hongju was also present at the trial, and she helped the victim's father regain his composure. Hongju also gave an important suggestion to Jae-chan to end the case. For law practitioners like him, the law could not be so loose. Because of the defendant, the victim fell into a state of brain death. Even if the doctors did not perform the transplant, the victim would have died after a few hours. If there was no criminal act by the defendant, the victim would not have died. The law must absolutely not be confused on this point. The greatest responsibility for the death and the crime must be clear. The arguments Jae-chan presented had absolutely no loopholes. It caused the court to change its decision. Everyone admired the sense of justice of the young prosecutor. The writer was sentenced to 7 years in prison for murder. After all, justice won. When Hongju returned home, she talked to her mother. Hongju completely understood her father's accident. Even without her, that accident would still have happened. Therefore, Hongju should not blame herself like that anymore. Hongju's mother felt happy hearing that, because finally, her daughter had escaped the cycle of guilt. After Bo Gum repeatedly suffered defeats against Jae-chan, he intended to recruit Jae-chan's close colleagues to work for him. One of them was Supervisor Choi Sung. Bo Gum invited him with a salary 5 times higher than the prosecutor's office. This incident also reached Jae-chan's ears. Although outwardly he appeared to trust that his senior wouldn't be seduced, actually he still felt insecure because, in the past, Jae-chan had caused many difficulties for Choi Sung. To keep his senior working with him, Jae-chan treated him specially. He bent down to tie Choi Sung's shoelaces, then the two took photos together to post on social media. Whatever trick Jae-chan had to use, he had to keep his person. Even at night when Jae-chan was off work, he still carefully texted to beg Choi Sung to stay. Suddenly, someone handed him a will from his best friend's father. He wanted Jae-chan to look over this letter. Juntae was wrongly arrested and died not long ago. After seeing his brother pleading, plus the fact that the prosecutor in charge was Bo Gum, Jae-chan felt there was something suspicious about this case. To serve the production of a reality show, the editorial office sent Hongju to the prosecutor's office for 3 days to collect data. Jae-chan began to worry because Hongju was always on duty at his workplace. She might see his unsightly images. Chief Kim knew Jae-chan's worry, so he suggested Shin-jae as the interview subject. Although Jae-chan was a bit resentful, he secretly thanked his chief. As for Hongju, everything went very well. She recorded the scenes excellently, especially when the prosecutor interrogated the suspect. Based on her eyes and irrefutable arguments, Shin-jae made the suspect obediently admit guilt. Even Hongju was surprised to witness how prosecutors interrogated. Meanwhile, at the office, Jae-chan suddenly asked Choi Sung about the prisoner who had just died. Because he accidentally read Juntae's will and plea, he had some doubts in his heart. But Choi Sung said that case was closed, and there was nothing unusual. Choi Sung was also the one involved in investigating that case, so he dared to be so sure. At this time at the police station, Gutak had just arrested an illegal transaction. Someone paid the thief 10 million won to get an old phone back. The thief kept saying he wanted to meet the prosecutor because he wanted to prove himself completely innocent. The police had to contact Jae-chan to prepare for the interrogation. The entire working process was meticulously recorded by Hongju. The thief this time was a bit special because he shared the same name as Chief Kim. He was also the one arrested 10 years ago for theft. When the thief met the prosecutor, he cried bitterly. The thief recounted his misery like 10 years ago. He said his only daughter had a traffic accident, so he had to steal to get money to care for his daughter. The thief accepted all forms of investigation and trial. He only asked the prosecutor to give him freedom to go home to care for his daughter. These things were heard by Chief Kim 10 years ago. He angrily walked in, warning Jae-chan not to be deceived. He also requested an arrest warrant for the thief. Ignoring Chief Kim's advice, Jae-chan still decided to go to the thief's house to confirm the truth about the daughter. After Jae-chan met the landlord, he learned that the thief lived alone. An uncomfortable feeling invaded Jae-chan's mind. Although his intuition told him the thief was telling the truth, the result was not so. Because Hongju wanted to comfort Jae-chan, she also followed him here. The thief's story was indeed true, but it happened 10 years ago. The old lady selling goods on the roadside said that the thief used to have a small child. During the time the thief was in prison, his daughter passed away. If 10 years ago the chief had believed the thief's story, the daughter's outcome would have been different. Jae-chan felt as if a burden had been lifted after hearing this. Immediately after, he returned to the police station. He recounted that he went to the thief's house and knew everything. Jae-chan apologized sincerely to him on behalf of the prosecution. His dedication touched the thief's cold heart. Because Jae-chan was the first person to believe what he said, the thief trusted him and gave him a USB drive. It was in the old phone he had stolen. He thought the data in it might be useful to the prosecution. After Jae-chan returned to the office, he focused on investigating what was inside the USB. However, they were all just normal photos, except for the pictures of the patients. After Choi Sung saw the faces of these patients, he suddenly froze. These were all victims of a serial murder case many years ago. Choi Sung himself was the one who handled this case. Everyone was surprised by the information he just revealed. The case did not involve only 11 people, as in the report, but in fact, this massacre had up to 19 victims. Jae-chan immediately went to find the owner of the phone, but he arrived too late. Seon had been killed to silence him. Right at this moment, Hongju also arrived at his room to investigate further. The two were suddenly locked in the room by a stranger who locked the door from the outside. He poured gasoline to burn the room down. The two had no way to escape. Fortunately, somehow Choi Sung appeared just in time and saved both of them. Although he scolded the two severely for daring to risk their lives in a dangerous place, Choi Sung cared about them very very much. He said it was good that everyone was safe. Immediately after, the two were taken to the hospital for a thorough checkup. Jae-chan didn't know why his senior knew he was there to come and save him, but Choi-sung refused to tell him. The information about the case Jae-chan investigated was reported to his superiors. Everyone was panicked to learn that 8 new victims were confirmed. They were not counted in the report because they died after the suspect was arrested. Jae-chan suspected the real killer was someone else, or the person who killed the 8 people could be an accomplice. As for Ji-hun, the man in the fire last night, he was not the owner of the phone. He was just the one who received the phone from someone. It was very likely that the arsonist and the serial killer were the same person. Things started to become more tense than ever. The details of the case years ago showed signs of linking to the event that happened last night. What needed to be done now was to open a re-investigation. Prosecutor Lee seemed unusually thoughtful. After everyone was assigned specific tasks, Prosecutor Lee asked if Jae-chan was okay. Because opening re-investigation meant that the previous investigation had made mistakes, Jae-chan needed to investigate Bo-gum and Choi-sung. It was very likely that Choi-sung would be severely disciplined if this case had errors. Now Jae-chan faced 2 difficult choices. One side was justice, the other was personal feelings. Although Jae-chan knew clearly what kind of person Choi-sung was, as a prosecutor, Jae-chan was forced to suspect even those he didn't want to. Jae-chan curiously asked his senior why Choi-sung knew he and Hongju didn't arrive together, and why he knew Jae-chan was there to come and save him. But Choi-sung answered it was due to intuition. This answer made Jae-chan even more suspicious. Everyone in the office was gossiping about the case years ago. Most people thought Choi-sung colluded with Bo-gum to falsify the report. To protect himself, Jae-chan had to investigate the case regardless. Choi-sung returned to the office with a heavy heart. He decided to write a resignation letter. He wanted Jae-chan to be able to focus on the case. At the same time at Task Force 2, after Jae-chan saw Choi-sung's file, he realized that Choi-sung was his father's colleague years ago. He quickly returned to the office, but it was too late. Choi-sung had quit and left the place. In the letter he left behind, he clearly stated that he did not fabricate evidence. But because Choi-sung was a main suspect, his words had no value. Therefore, Jae-chan didn't need to worry about him, but should impartially investigate the case years ago. After hearing these words, Jae-chan also awakened. That evening when Hongju went to the convenience store to buy things, she was recognized by the employee there. Hongju was the reporter who interviewed his father before the court. The employee felt very angry because Hongju did not respect his father's feelings. At this moment, Hongju noticed the green umbrella nearby. It was exactly like in her dream. Suddenly, a feeling of fear enveloped Hongju's body, making her unable to move. Fortunately, Jae-chan appeared in time. He informed the employee that the unjust case years ago would be re-investigated. Hearing this, he was very moved. After many years, finally, his father's case would be retried, and his innocence would be restored. The next day, while Bo-gum was happily enjoying a cup of coffee, he received a strange message. Someone was monitoring his every move. Jae-chan appeared very worried when that person suggested meeting at 9 p.m. At the same time, the prosecution found the identity of the person who bought the gasoline. Surprisingly, that person was a woman. She was simultaneously the main suspect in the arson case and the unjust case years ago. At this moment, that person was appearing in front of Bo-gum. She was the one who sent messages threatening him. Runa warned that if she were arrested, even he would have to go to prison with her. Bo-gum went crazy seeing the killer from years ago threatening him. He was the one who forged evidence to help Runa escape punishment. At the same time, he pushed the pitiful doctor into prison in her place. Now Bo-gum had no way back. Runa had dealt with the lover who knew the story. Now, there was only one last person left to deal with, the female reporter reporting on the case years ago, and that female reporter was Hongju. The next day, Bo-gum invited her to his office. Hongju didn't think much, so she drank the glass of water he had drugged. Jae-chan woke up in fear. He had just dreamed his girlfriend was in life-threatening danger. Jae-chan quickly called Gu-ta to go to Bo-gum's office to check. After Hongju fainted, she was taken to the rooftop to be disposed of. Runa injected her with a drug that would make her stop breathing within 5 minutes. After Bo-gum witnessed Hongju being injected, he smiled smugly. Then, he immediately took a pill before acting against Runa. The sound of police sirens rang out right below the office. Bo-gum wanted to kill Runa to make himself innocent. Even if arrested, he would be considered acting in legitimate self-defense. Just then, Gu-tak reached the rooftop. He panicked seeing Bo-gum holding Hongju in his arms. Jae-chan also arrived in time. He quickly performed first aid before the ambulance arrived. The next day, Bo-gum woke up in the hospital. He recounted being drugged in his coffee cup. When Bo-gum gradually lost consciousness, he saw Runa taking Hongju out of the office. He tried to follow to stop Runa from harming Hongju, but the situation was unsalvageable. Bo-gum also revealed that Runa was the real killer of the serial murder case years ago. Although he advised her to surrender, it didn't work. Most likely, Runa saw Bo-gum and the reporter meeting, so she misunderstood and put drugs in the water. Then, because Bo-gum wanted to save the person, he struggled with Runa, and the consequence was that she fell from a height. But unfortunately, Runa had injected poison into Hongju first. Bo-gum even pretended to regret in front of the police to steer public opinion. But when the police announced that Hongju was still alive, Bo-gum began to fear his play would be exposed. Jae-chan breathed a sigh of relief because Hongju had passed the critical stage. Just 1 minute later, and the miracle wouldn't have happened. After Jae-chan heard that Bo-gum was advocating legitimate self-defense, he was very angry and just wanted to rush in to beat Bo-gum. Fortunately, Choi-sung arrived to stop him. He told that his brother used to be a deserter. Choi-sung felt very guilty for covering up for his brother, only for his brother to kill many people, including Choi-sung's boss. Jae-chan couldn't help but be angry hearing the whole truth. He blamed Choi-sung for talking about it at this time. The indignation indignation in his heart reached its peak. Now, Jae-chan just wanted to find Bo-gum to vent his anger, but Choi-sun stopped him. If Jae-chan punched him now, the court would strip him of his prosecutor status. Therefore, the best revenge was to patiently wait for the trial. There, Jae-chan would make Bo-gum pay dearly for the sins he committed. Returning to the investigation work, the prosecution was collecting evidence related to the unjust case. The fact that the killer was dead caused many cases to be closed. Now, everyone focused on the Bo-gum case, the person who forged evidence. He was extremely worried right now. The director of the law firm personally stood up to defend him. When Director Kang witnessed his secretive attitude, he realized immediately that Bo-gum was the guilty one. However, that was not as important as the company's reputation. Therefore, Director Kang wanted him to tell the whole truth before going to court. Finally, Hongju woke up. Jae-chan happily ran quickly to the hospital to visit her. When he saw his girlfriend completely safe, he felt as if he had lifted the burden in his heart. To ensure Hongju's safety, Jae-chan requested the police to protect her as an important witness. The person taking this mission was Gu-tak. Now, Jae-chan could focus on the upcoming important case. Today was the preliminary trial for lawyer Bo-gum. All evidence presented by the prosecution was rejected by them. They requested to summon witnesses to take statements. It seemed this trial would be long and very tense. To prepare well for going to court to take statements, Jae-chan invited everyone to drink to boost morale. Suddenly, Gu-tak's phone lit up, revealing the wallpaper. When Jae-chan saw the photo, he realized it was Hongju's silhouette, but she still didn't know who had taken the photo with Gu-tak. After Hongju left, Jae-chan suggested pretending not to know. That way the two could continue to be friends. Today was the day of the important trial. Everyone was very nervous and worried about the final result. Bo-gum was still smug, thinking he would escape punishment. He even came to advise Jae-chan to follow what the lawyer said. But Jae-chan didn't care about these words. He would try his best to put Bo-gum in prison. Choi-sung was the first person interrogated by the defense lawyer. According to the indictment issued by the court, the prosecution wanted to prosecute Bo-gum for forging important evidence. He had added a bottle of poison to the crime scene examination report. What was worth mentioning was that the handwriting at the end of the seized exhibits list belonged to Choi-sung. He recounted that when they rechecked the exhibits, because Choi-sung saw the name of the poison bottle was missing, he added it to the list. This was also what Gu-tak had seen in his dream. He began to fear the scenario where Bo-gum would be released. When the lawyer asked Choi-sung who was most likely to forge evidence, Choi-sung unhesitatingly pointed at Bo-gum, because at that time, he was only in charge of supporting the prosecution. So all awards after the case were received by lawyer Bo-gum. Therefore, Choi-sung had no reason to forge evidence. The advantage began to lean towards the prosecution. The second witness summoned by the court was Hongju. She was the victim of the case that happened on the rooftop a few days ago. While Hongju was dragged to the rooftop, she clearly saw two people holding umbrellas. This contradicted Bo-gum's claim. As he once said, Runa was the one carrying Hongju to the rooftop. Then she couldn't have free hands to hold an umbrella. But if there were two perpetrators, the appearance of two umbrellas was completely reasonable. Now it was the defense lawyer's turn to ask questions. He gave Hongju a drug instruction sheet and asked her to read it. Lawyer Park highlighted the section about the drug's side effects, which caused hallucinations in users. Based on this point, Lawyer Park confidently denied all allegations Hongju aimed at Bo-gum. Things started to go bad as her testimony lost reliability. The scales of justice gradually returned to their balanced position. The result of this battle would depend entirely on Gu-tak's testimony. He worried as destiny lay in his hands. Hongju hurriedly ran to remind him about the colors of the two umbrellas. Gu-tak felt surprised that she knew the secret of his color blindness. Before that, Hongju had asked Gu-tak to find a red power bank, but he gave her the green one. Hongju had perceptively realized this. If Gu-tak's color blindness was revealed while testifying, he would be expelled from the police force. Hongju was very afraid of this scenario happening, so she told Gu-tak to hide. But Gu-tak's conscience didn't allow him to do that. He hugged Hongju to gain more motivation. He was determined to face the truth he always hid. Returning to the trial, after Gu-tak read the oath, he was questioned by the prosecution. He recounted the entire incident on the rooftop. At that time, Gu-tak saw the lawyer carrying Hongju down. There was no one around, only two umbrellas lying alone in a corner. After staff checked the two umbrellas, they found both had the suspect's fingerprints. This proved the killer intended to go down with Bo-gum. This important evidence rejected the claim of legitimate self-defense put forward by lawyer Park. Now Gu-tak only needed to confirm the shape of the umbrella, and the trial would end. Gu-tak easily described the shape of the two umbrellas, but when he got to the color part, he hesitated a bit. Everyone held their breath waiting for his answer. Even Gu-tak was hesitant, not knowing what to do. Finally, Gu-tak revealed the truth about his color blindness to the court. Everyone was shocked by this truth. Even Jae-chan didn't know it. Bo-gum started laughing gleefully, thinking he had won, but Gu-tak didn't let him escape punishment easily. Although Gu-tak was colorblind, his night vision was better than normal people's. Although Gu-tak didn't see colors, he could still recognize them by their characteristic brightness. The long umbrella with a wooden handle, curved like a cane, and the folding umbrella with a round metal handle. The long umbrella had a brightness corresponding to the green tie Bo-gum wore, and the small umbrella was red like the prosecutor's robe. Everyone was surprised when the images of the two umbrellas were announced. They were completely identical to the description Gu-tak just gave. The trial ended with victory leaning towards the prosecution. Bo-gum now had no hope of escaping punishment. Although Gu-tak could push the villain into prison, Gu-tak had to give up the job he loved. Even so, he had excellently completed the assigned mission. After the trial, Choi-sung went to meet Bo-gum. He wanted to advise Bo-gum to give up and surrender. Bo-gum felt very angry hearing that. He was betrayed by the person he worked with. Choi Sung advised him to sincerely admit his mistake, then he would receive leniency from the law. When Choi Sung saw Bo-gum, he remembered his deserter brother. If back then, Choi Sung had dissuaded him instead of covering up, would these tragedies have happened? But Bo-gum didn't want to hear another word from Choi Sung. At this time, Jae-chan also saw Choi Sung, but before he could reach his senior, Choi Sung was hit by the car driven by Bo-gum. Jae-chan painfully hugged his senior. From the moment Choi Sung was saved from the cold river by him, he had dreamed of this day's scenario. Choi Sung's funeral was held the very next day. His colleagues were all sad and mourning, especially Jae-chan. He was very sad when Choi Sung died, right before his eyes. He was like a friend, a brother, an uncle who helped Jae-chan a lot. Not long after, the final sentence for Bo-gum was also given. He would have to suffer life imprisonment for the sins he caused. Life continued like that. Gutak was now focusing on studying to take the law school entrance exam. His dream now was to become a talented lawyer. The prosecutor's office also welcomed new good news, as Prosecutor Lee and Sun Hyun got married. Those who were once saved by Jae-chan all had happy new lives. After many ups and downs, Jae-chan and Hongju had a happy ending. The movie ends here today. See you in the next video.